In terms of how much it still hurts him, that's what came across to me, is that actually losing really hurts. I mean, we didn't show the clip, but he did tell me that, you know, he was in the car with Ula on the way home from the Leeds game, and she was trying to distract him and it just wasn't working. No. He feels that pain. He also admitted there, he was quite candid about that fact, that if perhaps they'd got another player, maybe he was alluding to it, you know, one more player might or might not have made the difference. Do you think they will look back and think, hang on a minute, we should have spent more in the summer?
I think definitely that midfield area, they've known for a while, and not just ahead of this season's building, that department was going to become an issue for them, and they needed to fortify it because of the age profile of some of the players. You look at Henderson, Thiago, you have older players and very young players like Harvey Elliott in there, and Cavallo. And there's no real balance between the two. You also have players who are injury prone. So Thiago is one of the best midfielders I've ever seen live. He is extraordinary. But he's not available for much of the season. And they knew that when they got him in from Bayern. So that midfield was a red flag, and then it was neglected. They did want to strengthen in the summer. They liked a few players that ended up going elsewhere. But I think what Liverpool did is they thought, okay, we're not going to get our top choice, so let's hang on for another window. But that area, like I say, because of people being injury prone, because of the age profile. And by the way, you think about the way Liverpool play and Klopp's style, you need runners, you need, you know, people who are going to have the ability to press and stuff. And as players age, that recedes quite heavily. And I think that's what we're seeing. So the fact he admits to it is quite huge, because I think, you know, at the start of the summer, he was asked, do you need a midfielder? And he's like, look at the squad we have, tell me what we're missing in midfield. And as the summer progressed, towards the end of the way, he was saying, you guys are right, I was wrong, we do need another midfielder. And they went for, you know, they went for a short-term option. He's also injured, Arthur. Again, another player that does have a profile of being injury prone, but can sort of offer what Thiago does. But if you don't have both of them, that's not helpful either. So I think Liverpool will do heavy work there. There is surgery needed in midfield. It's going to be costly, but it needs to happen.
Yeah, it's interesting. There's a big piece, I think, with Jordan Henderson from their midfield in the Mail today. What's he saying?
This is a brilliant interview with Ollie Holt, where Jordan addresses a lot of things, including what you've just been talking about before. But first of all, there's the headline. Some people have wanted me out of here from the day I arrived, so now is no different. I prefer it when I have my doubters. And I do remember when they signed him from Sunderland, and there were quite a few people who were not enamoured, particularly because Steven Gerrard had been such an outstanding leader for the club. But Henderson has been simply brilliant in terms of his leadership, his ability to take responsibility. You know all about the respect that he commands within the club. And so he addresses that, and it's quite a nice opening to this, because clearly he and Ollie are having a meal, and Ollie puts that to him, look, is this the end? And Ollie talks about the withering stare that Henderson fixes him with in response to that question, because the mentality at Liverpool is that, you know, the club is bigger than any one individual anyway, but in terms of his own determination and his ability to kind of reject giving up, if you like, that's never going to be the case. But this is a wide-ranging interview. Just to answer the point that you were making a second ago, because Ollie asks him about Fabinho 29, Henderson 32, Thiago 31. He says 4 or 5 months ago we nearly won every trophy you could win. I don't think you can turn into a really bad team overnight and really bad players in that space of time. We haven't aged overnight. We know the only way to get back to that is by working harder than anyone else. I've been in situations like this before, if not worse. I know things can change so quickly, good and bad. You only have to look at Leicester to see that is a case in point. He also addresses Jude Bellingham as well, and he says, I'm very excited by Jude as a person and as a character and a person. I can't speak highly enough of him. I'm cautious of speaking too much around him because it's easy to forget how young he is and there's a lot of pressure on him. Let him play, let him enjoy his football. He's been doing fantastically well again this season, which is no surprise. But this is the most significant aspect of the interview, because he addresses for the first time that incident in the game against Arsenal, where he was accused of saying something very offensive, and it would appear from his response here that it was a comment of a supposed comment of a racial nature, which obviously we now know he's been found innocent of any wrongdoing. And he says, I understand why I have to be asked about this, but what I've tried to do was respect the process. I've spoken before about the need for black players to be listened to if they come forward. And what he does in this piece is talk about, I'll quote him. He says, I've spoken before about black players being brave enough to speak about discrimination, so I couldn't then change my stance. I still feel I need to show respect now, even though it's been dealt with. I've let the FA do what they needed to do, and I still feel it wouldn't be right for me to speak about it. It's just as important to respect the process afterwards as it is during the case. I could speak to you all day about how I was feeling, but I have to accept what happened and move on. By the way, that wasn't easy. There's more of it, but he addresses it for the very first time. And as always, it's dealt with brilliantly by Ollie. You know Jordan, anyone who's come into contact with him knows that he doesn't have that in his locker. I do think in relation to this, I have concerns about the way it was handled. I don't mind being honest about them. I think there are a lot of footballers who have come forward with justified complaints about racism, who have waited months. Jordan Lecco is a good example, who waited 7 months for his case to be heard. Now, none of that is Jordan's fault, because Jordan basically was in a situation where he was able to defend himself successfully, and so that you've got to park that to one side. My concern is with the FA around this. Why does it take 7 months for a player who doesn't have that profile to have his case adjudicated? Ivan Toney is all over the front pages of the papers today. He's waited months for his case to be adjudicated on. It's anyone who knows anything about sports betting knows it's very, very easy to get hold of betting records. Why has this guy had that hanging over his head for months? So it raises huge questions around the process. And another thing, for all the brilliant things that Mikel Arteta has done and said, he said something at the start of this process that really did concern me when he said, what goes on in the pitch stays on the pitch. That should never, ever, ever be the case. Ever. And
we need transparency.
We need transparency, we do. I think the next time a player is accused of anything, they could. What the FA going to do then if the player says, or the representatives say, there has to be a media blackout? Because I think, and I cannot stress this enough, anybody who knows Jordan Henderson knows that he doesn't have that in his locker, so that has to have been a misunderstanding. But my question is around the process. If we can expedite a process for a much loved, much respected player in 3 weeks, why are we not doing that for black players the length and breadth of this country? Within, the Premier League, League One, League Two, League Three, we need answers around that.
It's a really good question. Thanks for that, Darren.